A new coalition is joining the effort to pass Amendment G, which looks to establish a right to an abortion through the first trimester.
Grant Green joined the virtual press conference and spoke with the new chair about what this new group brings to the table.
It's called Republicans for Freedom Amendment G, and they're looking to prove that more Republicans support this amendment than what we're led to believe.
I certainly can say that the majority do not want an abortion ban. And we need to support putting this into our Constitution.
Their partner coalition, the Freedom Amendment Coalition, and its chair, Nancy Turbeck, tell Dakota News Now that the 20,000 signatures, or a third of the total signatures that put Amendment G on the ballot, were Republican.
It is clear that this is not a partisan issue. Republicans want freedom just as do independents and Democrats.
Supporters say the amendment is similar to the 1973 Roe v. Wade ruling, making it more flexible the earlier in the pregnancy.
95% or more are in the first trimester or the first at least 13, 14 weeks. It is still going to address the needs of most women and girls that present themselves for abortions in South Dakota.
Long-term opponents of abortion, the Life Defense Fund, say that the amendment would allow painful late-term abortions and deprive a person of their life, calling the amendment a dangerous measure.
Supporters of Amendment G say these claims made by the Life Defense Fund are nothing but scare tactics to try to get people to vote against this amendment. In Sioux Falls, Grant Green, Dakota News Now.